Hi, I'm Rich Schmidt. It's February 17, 2016. We're here at Nicholson Library with Bill Apel. And Bill, we like to start our interviews by asking everyone the same question, which is why Linfield?
Why I'm at Linfield,
Why you're at
or why
Linfield.
I've been here all these years. Yeah, when I was in seminary and then graduate school working on my PhD at Northwestern University, it became fairly clear that what I really liked was the life of the mind and the life of the spirit. And so preparing for something in higher education made a lot of sense to me. And I had been ordained as a United Methodist minister and then eventually got my PhD at Northwestern in Christian theology and comparative religions. And so the ideal job, I thought, was to be a college chaplain who could also teach. And that combined what the heart and the mind, and in ways that made a lot of sense to me personally. And so somebody told me one day that there was a job posted on the bulletin board, and it said Linfield College, Oregon. I'd never heard of Linfield, and being in the Midwest and from Pennsylvania. So I thought, but it was for a chaplain's position with the possibility of teaching. And so I applied for it in 1975, and they interviewed me, and all over the phone and filling out questions and so forth. And at that time, Linfield really couldn't even really afford to bring me out that far.
Sure.
The college was going through some tough economic times in the late 70s. Mm-hmm. And so I applied, and I got the position, and so I came out in the spring semester of 1975, and then taught and was a chaplain for most of that time until retirement, and in 2011, I guess it was. So that's my story as to how I came to Linfield, and it was just the ideal position that I wanted. And Linfield as a college then really grew, both in terms of its size and the quality, I think, improved in terms of faculty and students. And so I was growing as the college was growing around me in good ways. And so I never thought that I would be here all those years, but I was. And matter of fact, I had never been to Oregon before. And so when we got here, I said to my wife, I said, we need to be prepared to stay here at least 5 years. We just can't come and run and leave. Mm-hmm. And so at the end of 5 years, I had some chances to go other places, but we really liked it. And so I said, mentally, we signed up for another 5 years. And so it was like the 5-year plan over and over and over again. So anyway, that's why I came to Linfield. And I really grew to love the kind of students who were here, and the faculty and the administration was very supportive of my work. And so that's the story.
What drew you into the idea of being a chaplain and a religious educator? Was there a driving force behind that?
I think that when I was in high school, really, in near Pittsburgh, there was a Presbyterian minister, a young man then, who was kind of my role model and influenced me greatly. And he was someone that was a mentor to me, and so I thought I wanted to go in this direction. And when I went to college, not only did I feel a sense of calling to the ministry, but in college I sort of really caught fire intellectually. And so that couple professors there really influenced me as well. And so these things all, as I said, came together. And that's pretty much the story.
So you mentioned that you and Linfield kind of grew together. Can you give me some examples of what Linfield was like when you got here and how you saw it evolve?
Yes. Linfield, when I got here, said it had 1,000 students. Really, the number was in the 900s somewhere, and we kind of stretched it a little bit. I came the same year as Charles Walker, who came as president, and I think he was president for 17 years. And Charles Walker was the driving force that really, in many ways, helped to save Linfield College and then to cause it to grow and make it into the school that it has become. And so that's the situation that we were growing into. And when I came here, I had some wonderful faculty who were mentors to me. Gordon Frazee was a name that's known to the history of Linfield, and he was my mentor here, so to speak. And he had been a college chaplain, but had done many other things as well, but was the head of the religious studies department. And so Gordon was very influential. And then I liked the liberal arts setting. I liked not I like to be in an environment in which people thought differently, and in which people had all kinds of different interests. And so that was very important to me. And so the school began to grow in that way. It added an emphasis upon international studies, which became very important to me, and several people there were sort of kindred spirits, and it was amazing that within maybe a decade or so, I was beginning to teach in the classroom in which maybe as many as half of the students had an overseas experience of some kind, international experience, or had traveled elsewhere in the U.S. And that made for just a wonderful classroom setting. And so that continued, as you know, and I think the emphasis is still there. And so that helped me a great deal. And early on, I was able to travel a great deal, and both to present papers and talk in Europe, and then eventually to Africa. And I also had involvement in peace and justice movements, which the college allowed me to have time away to do that. Wow. And so that put me in Russia and Sweden and just all parts of Europe, and eventually, as I said, in parts of Africa as well. So that was very stimulating to me, you know, and it was always a growing edge for me, and it just continued to open things up, and so that was my sort of, as I said, the growing edge of what I was doing, and it seemed to fit so well with what Linfield was trying to do. So the international program was very important, and the support of the college And the growth of the college, a number of students, faculty, there was always a good core of faculty, but the faculty grew, and that's another factor. There was a dean, Jack Housley, who brought a really good collection of young faculty here to undergird what was already going on, and that was another part of the change that was very important. Some of those things.
Sure.
Sure.
So I have to ask, you were ordained as a Methodist.
Yes.
Was there any difficulty coming to a school that's been so strongly Baptist?
No, there wasn't, and I wondered about that when I came, because I was totally unfamiliar with Baptists, and I didn't know many. I didn't know the organizations or any such thing. But I quickly learned that Linfield was associated with Baptist, but according to one great Baptist principle that they kept was the freedom of conscience and freedom to think one's own thoughts, and so I seem to fit into that as well. And I then had my ordination recognized by the American Baptists, and so I was baptized. I mean, I wasn't baptized, but I was welcomed in, and so I had ordination in both those denominations, and I actually began to travel more in Baptist circles because I was representing the school at times, and I became a regional kind of leader among Baptists in certain areas of peace and justice, and the encouragement of women in ministry, which was very important then. It was kind of a breakthrough back then, and then later on, gays, lesbians involved, so gay and straight as well together, and those issues eventually nationally I became involved with, and serving different Baptist parts of the more extended institutional life of that denomination. So I became fairly well known among those folks, and so that's it didn't seem to be difficult to make the transition from Baptist polity and ways of doing things. That the Methodist way was fairly compatible with it, and so there was never any problem there, and that became a part of my own life as well. So I was then becoming grounded in both those areas, and then gradually I became very much involved with Catholicism. And so I began to move some in those circles.
Interesting. So you mentioned a lot about your work with social justice, both internationally and then within the church. Was that something that just sort of happened gradually? Did you always have a drive towards social justice?
I had a drive for those kinds of social justice issues from the time I was in college, I think, and that's sort of where, that was in the late 1960s, going into the early 70s, and so I was very much involved in civil rights marches and marches against and involvement against the war in Vietnam, and those are some of the key issues early on. So that just became a part of who I was too, and the whole dimension of biblical teachings that had to do with the teachings of the prophets. They had so much interest in social justice and peace, and certainly with Jesus as a nonviolent, peaceful figure. And so again, that all added together. And then as I was involved in other religions as well, and studying them, Gandhi and all of that became a part of my background, nonviolence.
Sure.
Yeah.
So when you started on campus in 1975, how did you see your role as chaplain and as professor, and how did that evolve over time?
Yeah, as chaplain, I wanted to be fairly clear at the beginning that my work was with students and just counseling on all kinds of issues or crisis problems, and leading various kinds of worship and study groups. But I was clear from the beginning that I was not simply a chaplain to students, but I was a chaplain to the college. And that meant in some way not sounding, not wanting to sound overly prideful about this, but I thought the chaplain needed to be sort of, when necessary, something of the moral conscience of the college, or at least raise those issues for the college, and I did in various ways, and institutionally, when there seemed to be issues of fairness and justice within the way that the faculty did its business and students and so forth, that I would get involved with that and be supportive of always thinking about why is it that we're doing this, and raise the questions. I always wanted people to really think about what they were doing, and oftentimes I would sort of say to myself and others that we need to find the questions. The questions are oftentimes more important than the answers, because they will lead us in ways that we haven't perhaps gone, or they will remind us of something that we need to return to. So that's part of the whole deal of the kind of chaplain I tried to be. And again, Linfield was very good in not trying to define what I was to do. I had a lot of freedom, and when I came, I was. They hadn't had a chaplain for a number of years, and so I came into the position, and so anything I did was sort of a plus because nothing was happening.
Sure.
And so that was a good place for me to start. It personally was a good place for me to make my mistakes, which I was good at. I could do that. And then when I came to, the faculty was kind of divided over issues, and they had had a vote of no confidence in the previous president. And so everybody wanted to know which side I was on, and I said I just could claim ignorance, and say I don't know, and I haven't been a part of this, and so I could get out of the way on that one. And so oftentimes I learned that I could just sort of claim inexperience in things, and in a way I was only 27, 28 when I started, and it was a kind of position that is probably the second or third move that you ought to make, you would probably make professionally, and here I was. It was my first first position, and so you know, that was challenging, but I think I did okay. So.
Did you feel your role change over the years? Did you feel obviously you're trying to be a moral conscience and you're trying to do everything you can for all the students. Did you see it change or become more difficult? Or become easier?
It's always challenging, and I think it didn't. The issues would change and so forth, but for me personally, it sort of deepened, and the work in that sense, and maybe I had gained, as I was in training, a better idea of what we were doing and what I wanted to do. And the next president came along, and that was Vivian Boole, and of course she did a lot for the college as well. And I had a close relationship with Charles Walker, and so we worked together. He asked me if I was interested in doing something with Nobel laureates, and so we developed the Nobel Laureate program, and at first it was a sort of a major program, and later on it became just having a laureate or two come to speak. But at first it was sort of a really big deal. It helped to put the college on the map in a sense in those early years where Linfield had to find something to make it more distinctive. And so I think I worked with a dozen different laureates and got to know them. Some in peace laureates, but in literature and economics and all different other areas as well. So, and then Vivian Boole, she and I worked closely together on things as well. And so I always had this sort of easy access or important open door with the president, and that was always very, very, very helpful. And in some ways, I was, you know, they have the flow chart of where everybody fits on the college, but I was kind of, I floated through that, and I had the freedom of sort of doing these things in a way that didn't tie me into a particular part of the flow chart. So I like that.
That's pretty nice.
Yeah, it is. It is.
Speaking of the symposium, that was a question that we were coming to here. How Charlie just came to you with the idea, and then how did you go about setting it up?
As I remember, and this is only my version of it, but Charlie had seen a laureate program. Oh, he was familiar with a laureate program back in the Midwest. And so he asked me if I would be interested in something like that. And so we wrote to Sweden and got the permission to be able to call ourselves a Nobel Laureate Symposium. And there were only, I think, a half a dozen of those in the world then that had the sort of imprimatur of the organization, of the Nobel Laureate organization in Sweden and in Norway. So Given that, then we sort of moved ahead. I had done 2 major peace programs for the campus right before this happened, and I had several laureates come for those peace programs, and that was kind of the basis then on which we could build into the Laureate program. And so I think that's the way it developed. Other faculty got involved, and students, and international programs, and so we just sort of collectively then worked on it. And I think for 6 or 7 years, it was a major part of the life of the college. When we had the program, we would have like faculty would know that it was coming, and they would build it into their syllabus sometimes, or at least into discussions. And so it had that kind of character to it that it could spread out some. And I think when we had Elie Wiesel, for example, come, Nobel laureate in peace, but you know, a great writer, and
Sure.
The Holocaust survivor, and Night, and the book and all that. And we had about a third of the students were reading something by Wiesel before he came. And so then when he came, that created, you know, a lot of interest. It's now I think the college selects a book, you know, for the campus to read each year, if that's the way that it goes. We were doing something like that early on. It wasn't the same, but so there was just a large number of participants, and the community, McMinnville, and of course Eugene and Portland, and people would get involved that way too. And so it was just a good program in many ways.
So I know that one of Charlie's big programs, in addition to the Nobel laureate, was bringing lots of speakers to campus, lots of people to campus to raise discussion and conversation. And I know you had a role in that as well. So talk a little bit about that program, that kind of extended program.
Yeah, in addition to the Nobel Laureate Symposium, there would be just, one of the things that we did was brought several former presidents to Linfield. And again, I think the idea is that just to make the campus more of a, not insular, but you know, open to the world. And again, it didn't hurt in terms of putting Linfield on the map too, so to speak.
Sure.
So I think it started in part with my asking Jimmy Carter to come. I had known, I mean, I knew people who knew Jimmy Carter because he is a Baptist, and so, and I had tried for a year or two to get Jimmy Carter to come, and we got a phone call. I got a phone call from his secretary, and sort of wanting to know more. And I think at that time it was in the summer, and I was in Pennsylvania, and she called me there, and then Charlie and I called each other, because I needed more money to really cause this to happen.
Sure.
Jimmy Carter, like a number of people, he was developing his foundation, so he had a large speaker's honorarium, but it really went to the foundation. So, but we had to put money together to get him to come, and so I think he was the first, and then after he came, to sort of get a balance, I guess, Charlie invited Gerald Ford, you know, and so Gerald Ford came after that, and that was sort of the beginning of getting some well-known people, and then I think Charlie expanded and would have people, literary people who were well-known, and people in music, and I'm trying to think, like Beverly Seals, the opera singer, came, and of course she's very gregarious, and folks like that. And so that's how it started, and I think he kept that up for a number of years. And that really stimulated things in the college, I think, helped to. And then I think the college sort of got to the point where it was that was helpful to do, but then it was the school was sort of standing on its own feet and getting its own sort of academic reputation, growing, and was recognized as, you know, one of the top colleges in the Northwest, and by different magazines, and then nationally, and all of that helped. But this was just a small part of that, but important at the beginning, I think, of the growth of the college. As a kind of a catalyst for things.
Sure.
Yeah.
How did you work on, how did you develop relationships with students as a chaplain and as a professor, and how did you balance the needs of the sort of the secular and the religious students, or the various religious?
Yeah. As a chaplain, I tried to go where students were, you know, hung out, and I didn't stay much in my office, and so I tried to be around where programs were happening, or informally, sometimes in residence halls and various things. So that would be my way to sort of get connected with students. The classroom is just invaluable for that, and so I had to work at that, and it was very important that, of course, there is a separation between being a chaplain and working on how that need is being fulfilled in the lives of students and others, and then being a person in the classroom with academic integrity and so forth. And so I worked at that, and I think students recognize that I think oftentimes students would say that I listen to various points of view in class, for example, and I tried to give everybody a voice, and so I was never I never ran some kind of an agenda in class, and so I think I developed a reputation as a good faculty person, good teacher. Had a lot of students in my classes from all different areas of different kinds of majors and so forth. It was very mixed, and so that was important. And the classroom was always a place to get known as well.
Sure.
And certain kinds of informal programs for students. At one point into my work here, we were able to, with the help of some people in the community who gave a lot of money, we bought what is the Emmaus House, and that when it started out was a place where, of course, I did different kinds of programs within the chaplaincy, but some of the programs were not specifically religious, so to speak. We had a coffee house in the Emmaus House. I think it was every Saturday night we had a coffee house, and even in the early 1980s, there was still not a lot going on campus. I mean, there's so many things going on campus now, but there really wasn't always something to do on the weekends on campus, and so this, fulfilled that need for a while, and a lot of students would come, and I'd have faculty come and do different things if they had any musical ability, like Peter Richardson in languages, played the guitar, played the banjo and sang, and so he would come, and there would be others as well, some from the music department. And so it would be a chance for students to see the faculty in a setting that was not the classroom, and I think they enjoyed that, and we did that for a number of years. So that was one of the ways that I always tried to build bridges between different groups of students and faculty, and so I guess I tried to be a bridge builder, and so that was clearly a part of my understanding of what I was doing, and so that Emmaus House for a while worked in a way that was an open place for people to come, and so that's an example, I think, of what you were asking me. Yeah.
How did you see the needs of students change over the? I mean, you were in here for nearly 40 years.
Yeah.
How did you see students' need change?
Some things never change, because students who are 18, 19, early 20s, there are certain issues that they're working on just in terms of life issues. And so some of those issues for students who are working really on just developing their own identity, who they were, relationship issues were always part of the counseling.
Sure.
The counseling part, and a lot of dealing with how the student felt in terms of how he was relating to other students, intimate relationships, sometimes relationship with faculty, students, that kind of thing. That doesn't really change. That remains an issue that's kind of constant. And life and death issues don't change. Sickness, and divorces in families that happen while a student is away at school, death, and those kinds of issues don't change that much. There were some tough ones. I think there were, for example, in those 40 years, 7 or 8 student deaths that happened here through accidents or suicide or whatever while the students were on campus. And of course, that grief counseling is always a part of what happens. And and students also, in terms of athletics, for example, such a strong athletic tradition here. And I was an athlete in college, and so sometimes I would make that known, and so there would be those kinds of issues about dealing with just one's involvement in sports and that kind of thing. What changed was the students' level of interest sometimes in world events, social issues. Sometimes one generation, so to speak, of students would be very much interested in that, and then there was a generation that was looking more inward, and those kinds of things changed with students, and that's I was here long enough to see that, and of course those were given names, like the me generation or the now the millennials, but and those are kind of stereotypical things, but there is some truth in it. So those issues would change. Issues that the college was related to would change as well, and whether it had to do with employment issues or whatever. And I got involved. I was in some ways a mediator sometimes for issues that would arise with staff and between staff and between the administration and the faculty. Sure. Those kinds of things. Those were always changing as well. But as far as the students go, there was never a time where I wasn't really positive about the students, and the students were always, I think, by and large, a good group of people, and it was just a matter of helping them to discover themselves more and their place in the world. But we've had tremendous students all through that time.
So it's a lot on your plate in a small college like this to be dealing with mediation and to be dealing with life and death issues. How did you personally deal with sort of the weight of some of those issues?
Yeah, there of course was someone that I had to turn to, and Densley Palmer, who was with Student Services and was a counselor for many years, was sort of my go-to person, and oftentimes. And then there were some faculty members that I could talk with confidentially. And for example, Joel Morant in anthropology and I are still very, very good friends. But it's true, the chaplain needs a chaplain, and so you need to figure out who you're going to do that with, because it does become, it can become not a burden, but it can wear on you, certainly, you know. And so, I think that's true also of just teaching and being a faculty member, or it's true of the staff as well, you know. Everybody at Linfield, I think still, because it is a small college, carries a lot of responsibilities and work, and so that's always an issue, and it's very important for anyone to find someone else that they can commiserate with and share these kinds of issues. And so yes, I had to find someone else, and I was fortunate to do that. And of course I was married and always had Jane to go to and to talk with as well, and she was my major person that way.
Sure. How did you sort of create your teaching philosophy, and how did it come to be, and what would you say your teaching philosophy was?
Yeah, boy, that's a good question, and a lot of it has to do, I think, with who your mentors may have been, and you pick some things up from them, and then you try to develop it so that it's your way of doing things. But my main teaching philosophy was always three things. I tried to help students to think more deeply, to feel more compassionately, and to act in ways of responsibility to others. And so those three things sort of influenced my teaching philosophy, I would say. In the classroom, the philosophy overall was to listen. To help students, I think, as I said earlier, formulate their questions, try to understand where they were and what they were dealing with, and move them sometimes forward. I was not the kind of teacher who, and this is important, there are some faculty members who really want to rattle the students, you know, to get their attention and take that sort of approach. My approach was, I think, probably more gentle, and I wasn't confrontational, but rather more of a builder once again, and tried to encourage the students in that way. And sometimes I would press the students, and the present chaplain at Linfield, David Massey, was one of my early students, and he always tells the story that he was a double major in business and in religious studies. So in religious studies, the students had to do a senior paper, and so he did his senior paper, and I thought it was good, but I thought it needed some work. So I told him to go back and work on it some more, and and then he would come back in with it, and I would say, well, this is not quite it yet, and I would say, we try to do this and that. So he went away again, worked on it, and I did this to him 4 or 5 times, and finally, you know, it was where it needed to be. And I would do those kinds of things because I knew David was going on, and I knew he needed, if I could teach him more about writing and working through a paper, that would be something he wouldn't have to try to do in graduate school. And so I would push students in that way, and he's never forgotten that. I think he tells students when he makes them do things over that I made him do this paper, I think, 5 times. But that's sort of a philosophy that I had, and I always thought there was something in each student that needed to come out, and so I would try to find a way to get that out. And sometimes it happened, and sometimes it didn't, but oftentimes it did. Yeah.
It's a worthy goal either way, right?
Yeah, it's a good try.
What have you been doing since you retired?
Well, when I retired, I thought I would want to do 3 different things, sort of split up my time. 1/3 of my time was Jane and I traveling and just enjoying ourselves and doing things we want to do, and then 1/3 of my time was to continue on my writing and research, and I've done that and have published a number of articles in various journals, and so I continue to work on that. And for example, I'm giving a talk in April in England to a group that I am a part of, which has to do with Thomas Merton, who was a American, he was a monk, Trappist monk, and a writer. And I guess with C.S. Lewis was probably, in the English language, the most read religious writer in the 20th century. So I sort of became well known for my work on Merton, and with a circle of people, some who were scholars and others who were writers and artists and so forth. And so I gained a sort of international reputation for that, and so I wanted to continue that. So that was another third, and then the final third, I wanted to be service to the community, or you know, and so I've done a lot of that through my church, but that's always been something that I always want to be giving back and working with. I think there's a free medical clinic that's developed in town, and I've worked with them, and they're open every 2 Saturdays a month, and are housed in the First Baptist Church, but it's a very broad group of community people, and very good people. And so that and working with the homeless here in McMinnville is part of what I do for that third. So I always try to keep that balance. And sometimes it gets out of whack, but it's I'm enjoying the retirement. Somebody said to me before I retired, you'll wonder once you retire how you ever had time to work full time and teach and do whatever you're doing. And I think that's true. Your time can fill up, but the difference is it's primarily things you want to do and things you can say no to. And so that's what's going on in retirement. Yeah.
How would you say Linfield, you've sort of answered this a lot of different ways, but if you could sum it up, how would you say Linfield has influenced you, both personally and professionally?
It's one of the major influences, of course, in my life, and it's more than anything else, it's the people. And I think that's always what has stood out about Linfield, are the relationships, the people, and whether you're dealing with students or faculty, staff, administration, it's the people within Linfield who have shaped me and in certain ways helped me to grow and challenged me and have comforted me. and so I think that's the hallmark of how Linfield has helped me, and I think maybe many others as well. Like any institution, Linfield is not perfect by any means, and it always has its issues and problems, but it's really managed to consistently have good people, I think, in it, and that's the main thing, the relationships, the people. That has made such an impact on my life, obviously, and so that's it. It's always people.
Where do you think the college is going, and where would you like it to go?
Well, that's a good question. I think that I would like for the school to take what's best from its past and its tradition, and take time to look at that, even like what we're doing here. Be aware of that, and take what is most true and best about that, and use that as a basis to go into the future. But I think the college is on good standing right now as an institution, and I think the next step is always to move from being a very good regional college to becoming even more nationally recognized, which it I think deserves to be. But one of the issues that we had, and I don't know whether that it's true or not now, is sometimes we don't realize how good we are, and so we don't share that in appropriate ways all the time. But I think Linfield ought to feel very good about itself and move confidently into the future remain, I think, a liberal arts college, maintain about the size that it is now, I think, and that I think is a real characteristic of the school that needs to be preserved and worked on even further. And it's going to be very challenging, you know, because of the costs, trying to find a way to deal with that, and trying to find a way to be a private institution in our society where it's increasingly difficult to do that, I think. So that's what the future is. I would hope for Linfield. Yeah.
What advice would you give Linfield students today?
Oh my. I think that I would say to Linfield students, learn to believe in yourself, but also, as you do that, recognize that there's something larger than yourself to believe in and to be a part of in terms of the community, and to always, I think, develop this balance between being a free person and being a responsible person. So freedom and responsibility, I think, is very, very important. And of course, I'd want students to also realize that there's a spiritual dimension to their lives, and that's something you can't weigh or measure. You know, it's something that's there. I believe it's always there. Sometimes it needs to be discovered or rediscovered, and so I would want the students to think about not only the intellectual part of life and the psychological part, and certainly the vocational part, but also the spiritual dimension. It would be very important. That'd be advice I would give to the students, or to anybody else, I guess, who listen. Yeah.
That's a good answer. Good answer. That's all the questions that I have.
Okay.
Is there anything that I forgot to ask? Anything else you'd like to talk about?
No. I think you did a very good job. Thanks.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you.